Good day, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dean Davey, and today we'll be discussing the topic of organizational behavior, specifically the topic of leadership. Somebody once described leadership as the ability to get people to want to do the things that you need them to do, in a way that after the project they feel like they've achieved it themselves. Today with me to discuss this issue, I have two esteemed guests. I have Commandant Jake Moores and Roger McCartney. Gentlemen, welcome to the panel. Thank you for making time to discuss this issue of leadership with us.
Pleasure.
If you could just give a brief description of yourself.
I'm Roger McCartney from Performance Inspired. My background is having 30 years in public sector, particularly with local authorities. I've also been regional manager with the Chartered Management Institute, which is a professional body for management and leadership. So I've worked extensively with educational partners and employers on the development of management and leadership skills.
Thanks, Roger. Jake?
I'm Commodore Jake Moores. I've been in the Royal Navy for 34 years. I've commanded 3 submarines, and now I'm head of the Britannia Royal Naval College and also head of the Royal Naval Leadership Academy.
Fantastic. Welcome, gentlemen. Well, that brings us to today's case study, where a leader is facing some interesting decisions around one of the key staff performers in her team. Gentlemen, leadership. Everyone has their own views on leadership, and I think I'd like to start this discussion by asking you what your specific views around leadership are.
Yeah, in day-to-day activities, and depending on our position in the organisation, we sometimes are the leader, and sometimes we're responsible for the practice of leadership, which is actually bringing everyone else into the scheme of things. So there are moments when we are the leader and people are looking for us for direction, clarity, purpose, and the role of the leader is actually effective communication in those situations. But the other art is about getting people engaged with what you're about, and that is about developing leadership. And leadership is the thing that brings performance out.
Very complex task to be a leader by the sounds of things, Roger.
It's a key challenge. It's one of the most difficult tasks that we all learn. We often come into a career as professionals in whatever that discipline is. But leadership and management are skills that we need to develop and acquire to be effective in whatever that role is.
Absolutely. Jake, I'm sure you've got some very interesting views on leadership as well.
Yeah, I think I have. To me, leadership is about inspiring people, either individual or teams, to achieve something. And I see leadership on 3 levels. Tactical leadership, where you've got small teams are trying to achieve an aim. For example, in the Navy, that might be putting a fire out or storing ship. Some small activity that just requires a small team to achieve something. Then the operational level leadership, where you're leading a much larger group of people, probably in the hundreds. And for that could be the organisation of a ship, or perhaps a small set of ships, of small ships. And then we're moving up a level to strategic leadership, where you might have thousands of people in an organisation. And that then is completely different. And really you need to be able to delegate down to let your other leaders lead their little parts within it, but coordinating the whole thing. And I think leadership is about setting a vision. It's about knowing where you want to go in the future and about setting out how you're going to get there. I see that's the most important part of leadership.
That's fantastically refreshing. An interesting topic of conversation nowadays is the so-called differentiation between leadership and management. And you've kind of touched on that already. Do you think there's a difference? And if so, what is it?
I think there's a very fundamental difference. Leadership, as I said, is about inspiring people to do something. Managing is about managing the resources in order to achieve that. And they are completely different and require very different skills.
Roger, would you agree with Jake on that?
I'd absolutely agree with Jake. Management really is about systems, processes, procedures. These are the ways that we establish norms within the organisation to help us to achieve those things. But in terms of engaging people with those systems, we need to be leading. We need the engagement of them in the leadership challenge.
Very interesting. I once heard somebody say that to be a good leader, you have to be a good manager. So if we were investigating or exploring the situation where a person needs to inspire but also drive performance towards a specific output? Would there be a situation where a person needs to be a leader and a manager in a given situation?
I think I'd say we all need to be leaders and managers. I see them as intertwined qualities. And in fact, you could say the closer to the top of the organisation, we may be leading for 80% of the time, but only managing for 20% of the time. Whereas when we're at operational level, it might be the other way around. We might be doing 80% management and only 20% leading. But all of us at all levels need those qualities and abilities.
So would that be situational when you're jumping in and out of those two situations? Would it be dependent on what you're trying to achieve, what state of a business you're in, etc.? And as a leader, you have to, I guess, have the ability to jump in and out of knowing when to lead and when to manage. Jake, what would you on that be?
I think I agree. I think leadership is certainly situational dependent. I don't think it's a smooth flow through, as described in certain models, but I think that you need to adapt your leadership style and the way you're operating depending on the situation. And sometimes there'll be more leadership and less management, and sometimes you might need to get into the detail and the processes, and you're managing more than leading, and you need to just adapt the way you interact with your team.
Very interesting. I guess that poses some good challenges for the people who are leading when they need to assess the situation and jump in between being inspirational and getting stuff done, aka performance, isn't it? Anyway, that brings us actually on to the next question that I have for you. And Jake, I'll ask you this question up front, is in terms of a process around leading, everything today has got a process. When you're restructuring, it's got a process, etc. Is there a process to leading? And do you have one?
I think that there are processes that can be useful to a leader. And I think having certain skills that you have learnt assists a leader in developing himself into certain situations. But I think sticking rigidly to one process is a mistake. You need to be able to pick the right tool for the right situation. And that varies enormously and varies continuously. So you could start with a team in one area, and you might have to change your leadership style and the processes and the skills that you're using in order to achieve the maximum from the team and the way they're developing.
Yeah. Roger, would you agree with that?
Yeah, when we're resolving problems, we need to be quite intuitive sometimes about the style that we adopt and whether we need to be rigid and authoritative, or whether we need to be more persuasive. But it really is about understanding the situation and understanding what is the best way and trying to use our judgment to find the best solution rather than developing scope for confrontation.
Okay. So if I'm a new leader and I'm listening to both of your answers on a process around leadership, what I'm hearing is a lot of flexibility, quite a bit of emotional intelligence to understand the situation for what it is, and then how to respond to that situation within the context of organizational goals, a team's goals, and an individual's goals, and how to manage all those complexities. If you were to define a very simple process by which you lead, just briefly, Jake, what is it? How do you look at a situation and say, this is what I'm going to do, this is how I'm going to lead this?
You look at the situation and analyse the situation. And I think any leader, the first thing you've got to do in a situation is to gather data. And you can gather data from a number of areas. There can be internal data from within your organisation, external data from the internet and other external sources, or you can get research done to develop data that you need. Then the next thing you must do is analyse that data. You must understand it, get rid of what's not important, but really look deeply at what is important and the trends that might be in it. And from that, that becomes your starting point. From that, you develop where you want to go, what your vision is, or where you want to get to. That becomes then what in the Navy we call end state. I think in business you call vision. And then you come up with your strategic direction, the pathway to that vision, a series of steps or milestones that you need to achieve to get to that place that you want to be.
Okay. And that's from an organizational leadership perspective. When you're dealing with an individual, would you apply more or less the same mantra, the same process?
Yes, but obviously you don't need to get as much data in and do as much analysing. You can just talking to somebody, you can get a view of how they're feeling, what they're about, what their problems are, concerns, what motivates them. Those are sort of important initial thoughts. And then you need to work out how you're going to inspire them to move on and achieve what you want. And different things turn different people on, so you really need to focus on what they're all about.